Hello again guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are taking a look at the DC Designs PT17 Stearman. The aircraft is published by Just Flight and it retails for around £11. I have to say that I was initially a little bit on the fence as to whether or not to review the aircraft. Obviously the DC Designs F15 from Microsoft Flight Simulator started off on a little bit of a ropey footing, and I tend to shy away from products where I know the quality simply isn't going to be there. But from the screenshots that I'd seen, the Stearman certainly looked rather nice. It's of course nice to have another open cockpit biplane within the sim. The aircraft is right up my street. So I thought we'd take a punt, give it a go and see what we think. Once again, this video will be a full review, so we'll cover all of the areas that we usually cover throughout a review on the channel. For the flight today, we're currently on the ground at where else but Lloyd Stearman Field, which is located in Wichita, Kansas. And we're going to be taking a very short hop around the local area, first out towards the town of Augusta, and then up northeast towards El Dorado, before coming back to the Lloyd Stearman Field. On our return to the field, we'll carry out a couple of basic aerobatic manoeuvres, and then we'll land and I'll give you my full opinion on the aircraft. As always guys, I do hope you enjoy the video and find it to be of use. If you do, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel. If you have any comments or questions for me, please leave those down in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Let's now continue on with the review though, and we'll take a closer look at the rather beautiful PT17 Stearman. So starting with the external model of the PT17, and I can't imagine there's too many people that think that the Stearman is an ugly aircraft. Personally anyway, I think it's a really pretty plane and DC Designs have certainly done it justice. As far as the external modelling and detailing goes, I think the aircraft's actually pretty good. It might not be quite up there with some of the very best aircraft that we've seen in the sim to date, but I would certainly say it's above average, and I couldn't find too many areas on the aircraft to complain about as far as the modelling goes. As you can see, all of the bracing and wiring looks rather nice, and the texturing there on the skin of the fuselage also pretty nice in terms of its detail. The textures of the external model are not the sharpest that I've seen on any aircraft to date, but they certainly hold up well enough. You do get a reasonably nice selection of liveries for the aircraft, and I think that the PBR effects throughout most of the aircraft are also done very well. Even close in, the detailing around most of the aircraft is very nice. As you can see here, the attention paid to the engine in particular, very good. So as far as the external modelling and texturing of the Stearman goes, I would say that the aircraft is middle to top range of Microsoft Flight Simulator add-ons, and certainly again the PBR effects really elevating the look of the aircraft. Again, I think DC Designs have done the Stearman absolute justice. Heading into the cockpit, and I would say that the story is broadly similar, although I would also say that perhaps the texturing is to a slightly lower standard than the external model. I actually really like the texturing in terms of its colouring and its fairly Spartan, slightly worn nature. But there are a few areas, as you can see the back of the cockpit seat for example, where the textures are just a little bit on the bland side. Coming down into the cockpit, and you can see that overall the modelling is pretty good. Again, not necessarily one of the finest examples of modelling that we've seen in the sim to date, but there's certainly more than enough detail there to keep me happy. And while some of the texturing does look slightly cartoonish, particularly the areas that you can see coloured in red, again overall I think it holds up pretty well, and there aren't any areas that really seem to be obviously lacking. The instrument panel itself I actually really like. I think the gauges are very nice, they're very clear, very smooth. I would question the font used for the text on the panel. I can't imagine that's period accurate. I'm certainly no font expert, but it looks a bit like Comic Sans, and overall it looks a bit laughable. I really don't like the text on the panel. But that's my only major gripe with the cockpit. Overall I have to say I actually really like the cockpit of the Stearman. Whilst it isn't one of the finest examples we've seen in the sim to date technically, overall it actually has a really nice feel to it. It feels very rugged, very authentic, and I really enjoy the experience one gets from being in it. Anyway, now that we're in the cockpit we might as well get ourselves sat down and comfortable, and we'll get the aircraft started up. So welcome to the cockpit of the DC Designs PT17 Stearman. Once again, overall I actually really like the cockpit. The texturing probably isn't going to win any awards, but I think the whole thing feels very nice, very rugged. Anyway, the before start checklist: the ignition is off, parking brake is on, battery can come on, and again I like the switch click sounds. I think they all sound very rugged as well, which is great to hear. Avionics are off, carb heat is in the cold position, nav lights are on, mixture is in the fully rich position. For the start itself, we'll prime the engine. It's a pretty warm day here, so we'll just prime it 3 times. You will notice the primer sounds are a little bit intermittent. If you click the primer too quickly in succession, then you'll lose the sound, so that needs a little bit of adjustment. Anyway, magnetos can go to both. Throttle will open 1/2 inch. And checking that the prop area is clear, which it is. Clear prop! I'm going to engage the starter. Really nice start up there actually from the aircraft. Engine quite hesitant to catch, which is great to see. Nice sounds as well. So far so good. I'm actually quite impressed with the product. Anyway, it's 700 RPM. Oil pressure has come up. We're looking for between 20 and 40 degrees on the oil temperature, which we have. So T's and P's are checked. Control lock is off. Avionics can come on. And we are now ready for the taxi, so we'll tune up traffic. That's 123075. The radios, as you can see, are a little bit strange in terms of the visuals when changing the frequency. Not sure how accurate that is. So we'll be departing out to the east. We'll call for taxi for now. We'll be off runway 35.
One Kilo 1 Traffic Golf, India Tango Bravo Sierra is taxiing to runway 35.
There is a very high-pitched squealing sound. I don't know if you can hear that. I'm not sure how accurate that is to the real aircraft or not. Sounds a little bit strange. Anyway, we are ready for the taxi. As I say, we'll be departing out to the north initially off runway 35. Plenty of runway for us from the intersection, so we'll go from the intersection. Park brake can come off. We'll come fully back on the stick. Overall, the aircraft feels good to taxi. I really love those engine sounds. Just having to use a little bit of differential braking here as well to tighten up the turn. Trying to be careful on the brakes, obviously don't want to tip the aircraft over. Yeah, I really like how the aircraft feels on the ground. I think that's actually pretty good. Anyway, we'll hold short of the runway. Park brake can go back on, and we'll come back to idle around 700 RPM. And the before takeoff checklist, flight controls, are full free and in the correct sense. Again, really nice sounds there. Strobes can come on. Mixture is in the fully rich position, carpet is in the cold position. Elevator trim, we're looking for 5 degrees nose up. Trim is a little bit fiddly to see there if you don't have something like Track IR. So for the takeoff, we'll be using full power, looking for a rotate speed of around 40 knots. Just checking the runway. Looks to be all clear, so we'll call for a takeoff departing out to the east.
1 Kilo 1 Traffic Golf, India Tango Bravo Sierra taking off runway 35 east departure.
And park brake off again. Back on the stick for now. As I say, overall I really like the immersion of the aircraft. I think the sounds do an awful lot to make the aircraft feel very immersive. You can hear, even if we bring the power all the way back, the engine stuttering away there. So we are all set and ready for the takeoff. Obviously a lot of tail dragger aircraft within Microsoft Flight Simulator tend to exhibit some pretty strange behaviours on the takeoff. I'll try and talk my way through as best we can how the aircraft feels. So feet off the brakes, slowly coming up to full power. Again, really liking the engine sounds from the aircraft. Anyway, this is full throttle. We're stabilised around 1700 RPM. T's and P's looking good. Again, the aircraft wanting to swing out to the left, but overall it's actually very controllable with the rudder. And just easy back on the stick, the aircraft almost flying itself off the runway, really. Yeah, so overall I have to say the aircraft feels rather nice on the takeoff. It still exhibits that sudden swing out to the left, but it's less pronounced than many other tail draggers in the sim, and certainly much more controllable. So that's nice to see. Anyway, we'll climb around 70 knots, so we'll just pitch the nose down slightly. And what we'll do, we'll enter into the pattern, we'll fly back overhead the field, and then we'll turn onto our heading out towards Augusta. Overall the aircraft is actually really nice to fly, very pleasant on the controls. Doesn't feel overly sensitive, but equally it doesn't feel overly heavy at the moment. Got a little bit of right rudder in just to keep that ball centred at the moment as well. And we're looking for a heading of 122 out towards Augusta. Then we'll climb up to around 3,000 feet. T's and P's still looking reasonable. Trim feels good as well, it's not overly sensitive. And once I've got the aircraft trimmed, it sits very happily where I want it. Anyway, we'll come round down to our heading of 122. Just coming up on 3,000 feet as well, we'll level off the aircraft momentarily. So there's 3,000 feet, getting the nose down. And we're about good there on our heading. Time out towards Augusta is about 6 minutes, so expecting to arrive about time 3:02. Just coming back on that RPM. We'll cruise around 1800. So more or less got the aircraft trimmed now for straight level flight, and again it's really pleasant, very easy to trim. Very easy to fly. Once you got it trimmed, it really just sits there quite comfortably. I've seen a couple of aircraft now in the sim that don't have any lubber line on their compass, which may well be period accurate, but it's a little bit frustrating in the sim. It makes it hard to fly headings accurately. And now that the speed's built up and we come back on the engine power, I've got the rudder centred and you can see the ball is right in the middle there. Just do a little bit of a bank just to see how the aircraft feels in roll. Overall it does feel perhaps just a touch sensitive in roll there. You can get quite a high roll rate with a very small amount of control input. We'll do a few manoeuvres over the field once we've returned home. Perhaps just a couple of aerobatic manoeuvres. But despite the aircraft feeling just a touch sensitive in roll, again overall it's very pleasant to fly. Pitch feels pretty good. Again, not too sensitive. Certainly has a little bit of a feel of weight to it. Just get the aircraft leveled off again. We'll see what sort of cruise speed we get at around 1800 RPM. Just crossing over Highway 35 at the moment, so we're about halfway towards Augusta. Just come back onto our heading. And another really nice thing about the Stearman, as you can see, the visibility is actually pretty good. The Waco, of course, really the only other biplane like this that we have in the sim, and the visibility is pretty limited in the Waco. Much improved in the Stearman. And again, with that engine purring away up in front of us, it's just a really pleasant experience sitting here flying over the Kansas countryside. So coming up on 3:08 on the clock there, we've got about another 2 minutes to run. So with the aircraft more or less straight level now, doing about 1800 RPM, we're getting a little over 90 knots, about 91, 92 knots from the aircraft, which I think is a little bit fast according to the figures given in the manual. It says cruising at 1800 RPM, we're expecting a cruise speed of around 80 knots. So the engine perhaps just a touch overpowered, or the aircraft perhaps ever so slightly lacking in drag. Okay, so we'll come left now to that heading, again heading of 036. And having updated the flight plan, we're looking about 6 minutes out towards El Dorado. You can see as well, you do actually need a little bit of rudder there to get the aircraft nicely balanced during the turn. Quite a few aircraft in the sim don't model that all that well, so again, really pleasantly surprised by the Stearman so far. Come slightly too far there on the heading, misjudged that a little bit on the compass, so we'll just come back to the right. Pretty decent wind noise as well from the aircraft, as you can hear the wind sort of rumbling over the airframe. At least I assume that's the sounds that we can hear. Anyway, we'll track out heading of 036. We should pass by the El Dorado Memorial Airport on our right. Basically flying a beam Highway 36 at the moment. Can't quite visually make that out though, it's such a flat area in this part of the world. I think I can just about make out the lake though, that's just out to the north east of El Dorado, so we're good on a gross area check there that we're heading in roughly the right direction. Can't see the town yet, but we'll point ourselves towards the lake until we pick up the town. Not too many other features en route really that I can show you or that we can use for reference. There are a few small roads as you can see, but they're not very clearly marked on the map. Just climbing a little bit here, so we'll just trim down a bit more. Get this back down to 3,000 feet. Fuel wise, we're still looking good. T's and P's, oil temperature just above 60 degrees there. So again, everything looking good there. And we should be arriving at El Dorado just before time 40. So sure enough, this is the city of El Dorado, just down below us. So we've got a little reservoir out to the south. what looks a bit like some sort of oil storage facility just off the left wing. Not sure whether that is or not, the scenery might be slightly inaccurate there. Almost overhead our waypoint now, so we'll start our turn out onto our heading of 255, back towards the field. Just squeezing in some left rudder again there, just to get the ball centred up. It looks like there is a railway line leading out from El Dorado, which we can follow back towards the airport if we can find it. We've got Highway 35 again coming in from the northeast. Just keep coming left on that heading slightly more. So that's about heading of 255. And the leg should be about 8 minutes, so expecting to arrive back at time 4:3. So as I say, I think what we'll do, we'll come overhead the field, we'll enter into the traffic pattern more or less from 3,000 feet, and then we'll do a few manoeuvres, maybe a loop and an aileron roll, something of that nature, just to see how the aircraft really responds. Obviously the Stearman is somewhat of an aerobatic aircraft. As I say, my sense so far is it is a little bit sensitive in roll, so I suspect the roll rate is going to be a little bit more than might be realistic. And with that perhaps slight excess of power that we noticed from the cruising speed, might perform quite nicely doing some aerobatic manoeuvres. So we'll make another position report. I assume there's no one in the traffic pattern.
1 Kilo 1 traffic Gulf, India Tango Bravo Sierra at 2 miles northeast, 3,100 feet inbound to land runway 35.
And obviously not particularly realistic, but we're just going to head over the field to carry out our manoeuvres. So we'll keep a nice tight downwind here, and then we'll make quite a hard bank over towards the runway heading. Again, just to get a feel for the aircraft handling. Once we're aligned with the runway, we'll carry out our loop, and then once we're out of the loop, we'll climb away, probably do a quick aileron roll, and then we'll enter back into the circuit for our landing. Probably ought to try a stall as well, just to see how the aircraft handles that. We'll do that at the end of the manoeuvres, so that we don't bleed off too much energy in the meantime. So we'll come on to runway heading now. We'll start building up some speed. Come back up to full power. Really nice change in engine note there as we come up on the power. Keeping a good eye on our airspeed as well, of course. So just rolling in. Again, the aircraft feeling a little bit sensitive in roll here, especially given that we're now quite high speed in the Stearman. Oh, really nice rattling sound there as well as the airspeed comes up. Creaking away as well at high speed. Again, the sounds in the aircraft are really excellent. Anyway, that's 2,000 feet. We'll come back on the stick. And back off the power. So overall, actually, the aircraft feeling pretty good in pitch. Apparently the Stearman is a pretty tricky aircraft to get into a roll in real life, and that wasn't too difficult. But equally, it wasn't too easy. Certainly, I had to come back quite hard on the stick there, not to bleed off all the speed going through the top of the loop. And as you can see, we did lose quite a bit of speed in the manoeuvre there as well. Anyway, we'll just get the altitude back a little bit. And then we'll do our aileron roll. So we're good enough there on the altitude. We'll just build up some speed. Start turning ourselves back towards the downwind position. So speed's back up at 90 knots. We'll go full left deflection. And I would say, yeah, the aircraft definitely feeling a little bit overly sensitive in roll there. I think that probably is quite a high roll rate for a Stearman. Anyway, come back onto downwind. We'll keep climbing and then we'll do our stall. We'll try a power on stall. So airspeed coming back through 60 knots. There's 50 knots. Aileron's feeling pretty skitterish now. The aircraft feeling like it's wanting to drop a wing. There's 40 knots. And quite an aggressive pitch up there, and then the aircraft dropping the nose. Keeping back on the stick, you can see the aircraft wanting to enter into the spin. We won't let that develop too much as we're fairly close to the ground here. But again, overall, pretty nice behaviour there, I have to say. Anyway, we'll call downwinds.
1 Kilo 1 traffic Golf, India Tango Bravo Sierra is on downwind runway 35.
And downwind checks, brakes are checked and off. Undercarriage is down, mixture is rich. Fuel pump we don't have. Instruments are checked. Landing light we don't have, and the harness is secure. Fuel quantity still good. We've only burned through a fraction of our fuel load there. Fuel burn doesn't seem to be particularly high. A little bit surprising on that count. I would have thought the Stearman would be quite a thirsty bird. And now for the first landing. That's always the moment of truth. So approach speed, we're looking to approach around 70 knots. Turn onto base now, we'll come back on the power. Start bleeding off that airspeed. Getting the aircraft trimmed for around 70 knots. Everything looking clear on final. And again, really loving the sounds of the aircraft. They're actually some of the best sounds I've seen within any aircraft in the sim today. All of the creaks and rattles, the air noise as well over the airframe. It really Adds to the immersion, and a little bit like the A2A aircraft, it gives you some sense of what the aircraft's doing as well. Anyway, we'll call final, we'll turn on to final.
1 Kilo 1 traffic Golf, India Tango Bravo Sierra is on final runway 35 to land.
So pitches full fine, undercarriage is down, flaps are set, landing clearance is not required, the runway is clear. All the way back at idle throttle now, as you can hear, we're doing 70 knots. It's giving us a descent rate of around 500 feet a minute. I think the landing should be quite interesting. It's going to be quite tricky with that nose blocking most of the forward view. Profile's looking pretty good at the moment. We might land a little bit long here, but that's okay. We've got plenty of runway. In fact, we'll just side slip slightly as well here, just to bleed off a little bit more energy. Also going to help us see the runway, which is an added bonus. That should do us. So the aircraft's still behaving pretty nicely at 70 knots. Holding the aircraft off. Speed bleeding back. There's touchdown. Not too bad. Trying to keep the aircraft straight. And just gently on the brakes, slowing us down. Again, overall the aircraft feels pretty good. No particularly strange behaviours. Again, being a tail dragger, that's quite nice to see in the sim. Pretty easy to land, at least by tail dragger standards. Obviously the view is pretty obscured, so that takes a little bit of getting used to. Another recent addition to the sim there, just passing off the right wing. Obviously we flew that the other day on the channel, if anyone hasn't seen that video. Anyway, we'll vacate here off Alpha. We'll go park back up. We'll get the aircraft shut down and then I'll give you my overall views on the product. I think I've already made it fairly clear though throughout the flight that I actually really enjoy the DC Designs Stearman. I think that squeaking noise is the brakes, I assume. Just seems there's a little bit of a bug at the moment with the part brake causing the same noise. Again, that engine sounding lovely as we come back off the power. So again, just using a little bit of left brake to tighten up the turn. And easy on the brakes to bring the aircraft to a stop. Part brake can come on. We'll let the engine idle back at around 700 RPM for the moment. So shutdown checks, brakes are on, lights can come off. Throttle will close. Mixture can come back to idle cutoff. Nice little shudder there as well as the engine shuts down. Carb heat is in the cold position. Avionics can come off. I suspect we should have got those off before the shutdown, but that's as per the checklist that comes with the aircraft. And the battery can come off. And that is the shutdown checklist complete. So as usual, we'll cap off the review by taking just a few minutes to talk about my thoughts and feelings on the product. Again, I think I've probably shown my cards already throughout the review, but I think that the DC Designs PT17 Stearman is a really excellent aircraft, particularly given the price. I really enjoyed my time out in the Stearman. It's lovely to be able to fly another open cockpit biplane within the sim, particularly given that the Stearman's visibility is much improved over the Coronado Wacos. Anyway, as usual, to break things down into a little bit more detail, we'll start with the negative points of the aircraft, and we'll work our way through to the positives. I have to say, overall the Stearman is a really nicely rounded product. There's no massive glaring errors that jump out at me. Most of the negatives I have about the aircraft are fairly minor in nature. Inside the cockpit, as we said, the textures are a little bit lacking in certain areas. The cockpit text on the panel I really think needs changing. That really degrades the overall look of the panel, which again is otherwise quite nice. A few other small issues that I found in the cockpit but neglected to mention during the flight. The joystick is currently slightly off centre. I don't know if that's accurate to the real world aircraft, but I suspect probably not. It doesn't have any effect on the aircraft's handling characteristics, but it just looks a little bit strange. And also when you do get into the cockpit, the default seating position is very high, it's somewhat unrealistic. I presume that's been done in an effort to make the aircraft a little bit easier to fly in terms of seeing over the nose. I don't think we really need that though, as of course we've already got the spacebar function to raise the viewpoint. There weren't any other camera options available, so you will have to manually adjust the viewpoint if you do want to alter it. Obviously not a huge inconvenience, but it is nice to be able to get straight into the aircraft and be ready to go. Overall, I really like the sounds of the aircraft. I think I made that very clear. I did notice one small peculiarity though. When the aircraft is viewed externally, the engine sounds are slightly different when viewed from the left as opposed to the right. I don't know if that was just a fluke of the way I was viewing the aircraft at the time, but I did test it a little bit further, and that did seem to be consistently the case. And my last couple of minor gripes really revolve around the aircraft's flight model. I was lucky enough to have a viewer reach out to me who actually has quite a few hours on the Stearman. They gave me their overall thoughts and opinions on the aircraft's handling characteristics versus its real-world counterpart. Apparently, in reality, the Stearman does have a slower roll rate, and whilst technically it is an aerobatic aircraft, apparently it's actually quite hard work trying to get the Stearman to do a loop, for example. I think this information might have coloured my view somewhat on the aircraft, not having flown it myself, but certainly versus my expectations, the roll rate does seem a little bit high, and as we saw during the cruise, the cruising speed seems a little bit high there as well, so the aircraft, as I say, either a little bit overpowered or a little bit under draggy at the moment. Overall though, that's really all of the negatives that I have to give you on the product. Once again, I think it's actually a very nicely well-rounded product from DC Designs. I was actually really pleasantly surprised. It went well above and beyond my initial expectations. So with that being said, moving on to the positives of the aircraft. I think for me the biggest and most obvious selling point of the aircraft is the sounds that come included with the package. I think they're really excellent. In fact, I would go as far as to say they are the best sounds that I've seen from any aircraft in the sim to date. I don't necessarily even mean in terms of how accurate the sounds are, but overall the sound package created a really immersive feeling. It made the aircraft feel very alive actually. And obviously in the sim we don't get any feedback through our controls, so it is nice to have the sound there to give you feedback as to what the aircraft is doing. Overall, as I said during the flight, it really reminded me of the A2A aircraft, where a lot of the feedback that you're getting during the flight comes from the sounds. Flight model wise, overall I thought the aircraft was pretty good. We did mention a couple of exceptions there. And once again we did see that swing on takeoff that seems to be pretty characteristic from any tailwheel aircraft in the sim. But that behaviour was much less pronounced in the Stearman and certainly much more controllable than we've seen from many other third-party aircraft. Despite the flight model having a couple of issues, overall the aircraft is an absolute joy to fly. Great fun, very pleasant. Certainly felt good in pitch, it wasn't too difficult to land. And as we saw even during the roll, we did need a reasonable amount of rudder to balance the turns. The stall felt pretty good overall, again much above the average standard in the sim currently, and the aircraft seemed to go quite nicely into a spin. So a pretty big thumbs up overall for the flight model. Overall I really like the feel of the aircraft when you are sat in the cockpit. Once again the sounds do go a long way to producing that effect, but as well the texturing and the modelling. I don't know, there's just something about it that I really like. Personal preference, but I love the fact that it's another open cockpit biplane that we have in the sim. It's really good fun to fly. And again, the visibility vastly improved over the Coronado Waco, so I think that's a big plus for the aircraft. In terms of the aircraft's FPS, that's also very solid. It's basically on a par with the default Cessna 152. I was finding I was getting maybe 1 or 2 FPS less than the default aircraft. So overall for me, the DC Designs PT17 Stearman from Just Flight, an absolute winner of an aircraft, well worth the asking price. It's actually going straight up near the top of my very favourite aircraft to fly in the sim currently, and I'm sure I'll be back up in the virtual skies in it fairly soon having some fun. As always guys, I do hope you enjoyed the video and found it to be of use. If you did, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. If you have any comments or questions for me, please leave those down in the comments section below, and I'll always do my best to get back to you. Also, if anyone does feel so inclined as to share the video, that's always a massive help to the channel, so I'd really appreciate if you can do that. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all again soon.